that was awarded to VR Laser. Are you aware that apart from Mr. Mlambo, who was the group executive in charge of supply chain at head office, Ms. Malashlela, who was the head of supply chain within the division, DLS, had also raised concerns about the compliance with procurement and also whether it was appropriate to go outside LMT?
Chair, I wasn't aware of that.
You mentioned a meeting which culminated in the document that we see at page 612, bearing your signature.
Yeah.
It's the 16th of October. And if you look on, this is the motivation that you signed off as approving the recommendation or endorsing the recommendation of the award of the contract to VR Laser. You see at the foot of the page 611, Ms. Malashlela's name and signature appear. 611.
I can see that.
Was she present in the meeting as far as you can recall?
She wasn't.
She wasn't.
The memo was brought by Mr. Beggar, already bearing the signatures.
So who was it at that meeting who gave you the assurance that the procurement and other concerns that Mr. Mlambo had raised and that you largely agreed with, who was it at that meeting who persuaded you that all of these concerns had been sorted out? Was that Mr. Burger?
Mr. Beggar presented the memo with this, bearing the signatures, giving assurance that the divisional supply chain was comfortable, and when a specific question was posed about Mr. Mlambo's queries, my sense, my recollection, not 100%, many years ago now, was that those are either being addressed or have already been addressed.
You see, a concern might arise where Ms. Malashlela, who occupied a senior position with DLS as the head of supply chain, she's obviously paid a salary appropriate with those responsibilities, where she has raised concerns within divisional level that are not brought to your attention. She was effectively pushed into a situation where she was instructed by the DLS board to prepare this revised recommendation this proposal to motivate for the award of the contract to VR Laser. That was against her own advice and recommendations. And then at head office level, which is supposed to supervise and ensure that divisions don't act outside the law and outside government policy and outside Denel policy and so forth, where Mr. Mlambo, the head of supply chain management at head office, likewise raised these concerns. I can understand you weren't aware of Ms. Malashlela's concerns. Does it cause you concern now to hear that Ms. Malashlela had serious objections to the award of this contract to VR Laser that you weren't made aware of?
I'm actually concerned that Ms. Malashlela had concerns, and we had quite a reasonable relationship that she never brought those to my attention. Now it sounds like serious concern, and I'm concerned not only for Ms. Malashlela, but also the emails that were shown to me by the investigators. And my overall conclusion on this, once again, there was too much closeness between this division and the supplier. And the division concerned must answer as to why this happened.
Indeed, you're right that it must answer, and Mr. Burger will be called to testify in the next few days. And we will certainly be asking him some of these questions. What I'm concerned about, though, is this. At this meeting, was there anybody from supply chain, either at divisional or head office level?
The meeting that was called at short notice when Mr. Berger came with this memo. It comprised of Mr. Berger, Mr. Vessel, myself, and Mr. Saluji, and it's not out of the ordinary.
Sorry, and it was not? Just speak up, please.
I'm saying that the meeting that took place, it was with Mr. Berger,
Yes, now I heard that, but just
Mr. Jan Vessels, myself, and Mr. Saluji, to consider this memo, and it's not out of the ordinary. We would meet on various issues.
yes. My question was anybody from supply chain management there?
There was nobody from supply chain, but the signatures that are in the memo were sufficient.
Yes. And did you raise with Mr. Berger or anybody else? Was it you who raised the issues that Mr. Mlambo had raised to try and get reassurance that they had been addressed?
I'm not certain who raised the issue, but all I know is that the issue was discussed.
Yes. And were you satisfied from Mr. Berger? Was it Mr. Berger who satisfied you that the questions or concerns raised by Mr. Mlambo had been properly addressed?
Yes.
You see, what concerns me, just at the level of governance and ensuring that things are done properly, is that you have a memo submitted to you that starts off with a recommendation from Ms. Malashlela, who has given evidence that she was basically forced to do this by her bosses, who included Mr. Berger. Mr. Berger doesn't seem to have conveyed that to you. And then on top of it, Mr. Mlambo had raised, to your knowledge, a number of concerns that you shared. Mr. Mlambo wasn't there to speak for himself. Ms. Malashlela wasn't there to speak for herself. So you rightly, Mr. Mshlontlo, to your credit, were concerned at least about the concerns raised by Mr. Mshlontlo and raised by yourself. But what troubles me is that Mr. Berger just simply said, don't worry, all of this has been sorted out, when clearly it's not the case. Mr. Mlambo gave evidence that they were not sorted out. Ms. Malashlela gave evidence that they were not sorted out. Neither of them was invited to the meeting. It may be that Mr. Mlambo was away at that time. Can you just explain to me about the urgency of the matter? We've already heard evidence from some witnesses that in defence contracts, it frequently happens that these things are matters that take many years. We know, in fact, in respect to the Hoefyster project, that it's already many years behind schedule. This is not an industry that has to be, as for example, dealing with COVID patients that need ventilators tonight. These things take ages. Can you just explain to the chair why this meeting was convened? I'm not saying you're responsible for that, but do you understand why this meeting was convened as a matter of such urgency? And as it happens, Mr. Mlambo is not present and Ms. Malashlela is not present.
Mr. Mlambo or Ms. Malashlela being not present wouldn't be a big issue, because there will be many other issues that get debated at executive level without Mr. Mlambo or Ms. Malashlela being there. But let me get back to the specific question that you're posing. This memo was presented to myself around the end of June or beginning of July, which I had rejected. Having rejected that, a number of various workshops and conversations took place where we were seeking to see if LMT can't become part of this process and be awarded to LMT. And in that process, it did create tensions, quite frankly, because we were putting our foot down with regards to issues of price, with regards to issues of LMT not being considered. And 3 months down the line, the division comes back after various interactions and gives certain assurances, or based on those assurances, this memo is signed off. What we know today, we did not know it in 2014 when this was being done. Bear in mind that Hoefyster had just been, I think it had been awarded probably at that stage. It probably was less than a year that this program had been awarded, and there was a speed at which Hoefester would be produced. At least that's how we understood it back then. That necessitated this particular finalization of the memo. At least that's how we understood.
Do you feel misled?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Chair.
This meeting, those who attended it, do they fall into a certain category that could have justified leaving out persons who had been allowed to contribute to the debate, such as Ms. Malahlela? Was it said maybe it was a meeting of the executives, or is there a basis known to you that may have been responsible for Ms. Malahlela to be left out?
The meeting took place literally. Mr. Berger walked in with the memo, went to my office and asked if we could converge. We met at Mr. Jan Vessel's office. CEO, Mr. Saluji, was invited into the meeting. Even business development executive was invited to the meeting, Mr. Zola Kanzepe. Those were the executives that met over this. And there were
From how you describe it, it seems like it was a rush meeting.
It was a meeting that
happened without much notice, and it was like, let's meet and discuss this quickly or something.
Chair, it happened along those lines.
Along those lines, yes. Okay, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair. Looking back, Mr. Mshlontlo, if you had known what you know now, from what evidence has come out, such as through what the investigators have shown you, would you have signed at this meeting to recommend the award of the contract to VR Laser?
Certainly not, Chair.
And do you feel that you were misled by anybody to an extent that that induced you, persuaded you wrongly to sign approval?
The process is compromised if you begin to read something that says, I will contact that specific supplier. I'll use other channels to get to them, suggesting that there is a relationship that's beyond the normal business relationship. And once again, as I indicated earlier, if you go to best and final offer, you would have followed the process of shortlisting. You'll be looking at those shortlisted suppliers to see what would be the final price that you'll go with. And it happens. I mean, I'm continue to be in business today. It happens every day. But there's a process.
Specifically,
yes, but Mr. Kennedy's question is whether you feel that anybody in that meeting misled you in any way as you sit there?
The aspect that is close to me to date, the fact that there were meetings outside the process, then it lends to one thing, that
you were not told about.
Yeah.
Okay.
and specifically in relation to the procurement issues, do you feel you were misled by Mr. Berger or anybody else into a belief, a wrong belief, that these concerns had been properly resolved?
At the end of that meeting, I had the understanding that either the issues were in the process of being resolved adequately, or were already resolved, and that statement, certainly based on Mr. Malambo's evidence in this committee, was not true.
Did you raise with Mr. Burger the specific questions, point by point, that Mr. Mlambo had raised in his emails to you. For example, that the tenders had not been sent out to the people at the same time, and the fact that there had been separate individual question and answer sessions with tenderers rather than the standard practice required by the supply chain management policy that everybody should be treated at the same meeting. Did you raise any of those questions with Mr. Burger?
My signing of the recommendation to the CEO for overall approval is based on three different issues as articulated earlier on. The issue that the price had now reduced. Even if Mr. Mlambo didn't have any concern, I would still have had the concern. I had a responsibility to ensure that the finances of the company are used economically. And I would have had an issue around the level of the price that we, at least preliminarily, it was as if we were going to pay that. I would have had the issue around LMT and also to look to see if there was no way that LMT would be part of this, whether we put certain mitigations in place. And so my issues and that of Dennis are complementing each other to a large degree are the same, but I had my own fundamental concerns on the process.
Looking back with the benefit of hindsight, which we all know is 50-50 vision, but looking back with the benefit of hindsight, do you now feel that perhaps you, quite apart from others, do you think that perhaps you should have been more detailed and more inquiring to be satisfied that all of the various issues raised by Mr. Mlambo, not just the ones that you focused on, but all of them were complied with, or resolved rather?
I suppose when we work as a team, we would expect all of us as executive who are contributing towards or working towards the same goal. So when you sit and looking at the division and look at the leadership, they are expected to play their part. I play my part. Now, with high insight, as you rightly say, and many other factors that we now know that we did not know back then, I mean, one would have been more circumspect on this.
Isn't that exactly the reason why you should be more circumspect? That's exactly why, for example, the delegation vests the authority to approve this sort of contract of almost 200 million at head office level, not the divisional level. You see, I understand your point that we were all working as a team and we're entitled to expect that we're all working for the same goal. Are you in fact able to say that everybody, with the benefit of hindsight, that everybody in that meeting was actually working for the same goal? In retrospect, do you not feel perhaps there's a possibility that some at that meeting may have been trying to manipulate you and the process to ensure that VR laser was given it at all costs?
Chair, what we know, that is not in dispute. There are many facts that are suggesting that this particular division was too close to that company, and this, I say that clearly in my affidavit, that this could have been staged, to say the least. But there were certain aspects that I looked into, and those aspects were the ones that enabled me to put my signature. Bearing in mind I was not the overall approver, but I was in a sense saying one or two issues that are critical to me, I think, had been addressed.
But not all of the issues raised by Mr. Mlambo, not so.
There was a specific understanding around Mr. Mlambo's issues.
Let me tell you what I understood your immediate past answer to me, to Mr. Kennedy's question. Understood you to be saying there can be no doubt, or there is no doubt in your mind, that either there was or there may have been some manipulation of processes when you look at the transaction with the knowledge that you have now. Am I right?
That's correct.
That's what you are saying? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to complete the questioning in relation to your earlier point that you're all part of a team working for the same objective. Presumably you're talking about the objective being the best service that you can provide for Denel in its interests through a proper procurement process that from a technical, financial, business point of view is going to get the best solution. Is that correct?
It is indeed.
And would you agree that Mr. Mlambo was motivated by that objective?
I would say yes, indeed.
Yes. What I want to suggest to you is that Mr. Mlambo was effectively, to an extent, sidelined. That if Mr. Mlambo had been taken more seriously in the concerns that he raised, and that you had perhaps been more careful in scrutinizing what Mr. Burger gave you as an assurance that all of those concerns had been resolved, that perhaps you could have stopped the award of the hull contract to VR Laser by Denel's land systems entity. Is that fair to say?
No, it's certainly
No.
not. No. I got presented with a memo. We got people with certain skill sets, with over 20 years experience of assembling vehicles, designing, engaging with clients. They've done and carried out their big, executed big projects in the past, and those individuals with that background, with the history of excellent work for the country, they produce a memo, they bring it to me. I query the aspects that I feel that are out of line. They go away, they come back. Those that are out of line have been addressed, and they make a representation to me. They say, Mr. Mlambo raised certain issues, and those certain issues we are addressing. Your specific issues have now been adjusted, and then under those circumstances, I would have been comfortable even if it would take me back to 2014. However, knowing what I now know, there was something wrong in the process.
Before I leave this topic of the award of the contract for the hulls, I just want you to refer, so can you put away the bundle 1 that we've been looking at? And I'd like you to go back to bundle 7, which contains your affidavit. If I can ask you in bundle 7 to turn to your affidavit at page 580.
Page?
580. At the top of this page, paragraph 3.18, you refer to emails that were shown to you by the investigators, DLS internal emails that you say you weren't privy to. They were discussing details of the tender. And then you say in paragraph 319, based on emails evidence, VR Laser Services was too close to DLS and the whole process might have been created for and just to favor them. These emails rendered the tender irregular. Had I known this, I would have even opposed the award much more. Is that your current state of mind?
Yeah.
Right, thank you. Now, the final point on this topic that interests me is 3.20. You refer to something that happened during the Denell Annual Women's Day function in 2014, and you received a call from City Press. The Women's Day is in early August, eh? I think it's the 9th of August.
We had a function in the middle of August.
Right, the middle of August was the function. And you received a call from City Press. Was that a City Press journalist?
Yes.
And what were you asked?
I was asked a question that, is it true that the tender for or relating to Festa would be awarded to VR Laser, or procurement would be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how did you respond?
My response was fairly standard, to say that any work that we put out there follows the procurement process. So there would be no one at any point who would just know who would be awarded what work. And when the question was posed, it was after Ufesta had been awarded to Denell, and my understanding is that there was going to be a comprehensive process around how pieces of work would be put out to the market.
Right. Thank you. Chair, with your leave, may we move to the next topic?
Yeah.
Which is dealt with from paragraph 4 on page 580, and I propose to deal with this very briefly. It's the acquisition of the BAE land system, South Africa. Now, the BAE is a reference to the British Defence entity, is that right?
Correct.
And that sold a subsidiary that was known as Land System South Africa, also referred to in the papers as LSSA. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, you gave evidence yesterday and this morning about the circumstances of your suspension, and the basis on which you were told that they were considering your suspension was that you and your colleagues, Mr. Saluji and Ms. Africa, had misled the board in relation to issues concerning the acquisition of LSSA. Is that what they alleged?
Correct.
So this is the very company that you're alleged to have given them misleading information about.
Correct.
Now, Mr. Mshlontlo, you've given very helpful detail in your affidavit from page 580 to 587, dealing with the background relating to the acquisition and whether there was anything wrong in relation to that. Now, of course, ultimately, if your disciplinary inquiry had been held, you would have had an opportunity to put all of this up before the disciplinary inquiry. How much of it may ultimately be relevant, if at all, for purposes of the Commission, will be for the learned chairperson to decide in due course. But can I just ask you to give, by way of just broad summary, your overall evidence, summary of your evidence overall, as to whether there was anything improper or irregular or unlawful or bad from a business point of view in relation to the acquisition of LSSA from your perspective, from your knowledge?
Chair, this business had operated in South Africa for many years. It had produced some of the military vehicles that are heavily utilized by our SANDF. It had produced the vehicles that were used in the Middle East by the Americans during various wars and so on. This company was brought to our attention by APSA that it was being disposed. My initial reaction was, initially I thought I wouldn't even meet APSA to discuss it, because Denell was not acquisitive at that stage. But out of ensuring that we had a business relationship with them, so we met with them. I briefed the CEO, who undertook to brief various stakeholders before we can take any view whatsoever. And there was a positive or support that is something that we must look at closely, because in the event that this company is bought off by other companies that are outside the state, there could be certain vulnerabilities that could be there within our own forces in the country. And we looked into that, went and viewed the premises of the company, the assets, the workforce at hand. We instituted evaluation, we instituted due diligence, we wrote PFMA applications to the ministries. After a protracted 15-month period, there was a PFMA approval after various requests for various sets of information and presentations outside of our own due diligences. And it was then, the business that was then bought. There are a few things that were linked to this process. One was that the funder, which was Nedbank, in principal funder, as we were pursuing this opportunity, and when it came to actually just about to conclude the deal, became uncomfortable, and their point was, in this funding structure we had incorporated ABSA as a co-funder, and they felt that the securities that had been provided for them versus what had been provided for ABSA were not on a pari passu basis, so they were not equal, and they wanted us to exit ABSA and use our own resources to fund. The alternative would be that they are no longer going to continue to fund. At that point, our chair of the board engaged directly with the executives of Nedbank, and the agreement was that there would be an sort of bridging finance for 5 months to allow a proper restructuring of the funding. And one of the things that stood out in the approval from the minister was the fact that we needed to ensure that there was equity partner as a part of the structure in terms of the ownership, not only 100% Denel, but there is an equity partnership. So the position by Nedbank talked to, in one way or the other, the fact that there was anyway a revisit of the shareholding of the entity. The equity partnership or process of searching for equity partnership started, and there was a preliminary view that should be a UAE company, Hawazun, and that was part of the handover process to the new board, which the new board did not carry that through. When we left, we had not fully restructured the funding. Because we were running out of time, we had arranged that the funding of Nedbank be extended to March 2016. You'll see the evidence in the pack. But one last thing is that ABSA was also exploring to take over the overall funding. Instead of the funding being half-half, let's take over the whole funding. But a lot of issues with the banking relationship with this institution arose when we were suspended. We had an unbelievable, mature relationship with financial institutions. No one deal can be concluded without a financial institution behind it to support it in the form of guarantees, etc., etc. We would have comprehensive engagement with financial institutions. And those relationships fell apart. Obviously, the institution suffered.
Thank you. Now, LSSA, once it was purchased, was then incorporated into the group as part of DVS. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes. And there was an agreement between DVS and VR Laser for a single source supply of particular items. As I understand it, Mr. Mshlonklo, that took place after your suspension. Is that correct?
have no knowledge of it, so it must have happened after I had left.
Right. Now I'd like to come to page 594, right near the end of your affidavit, to deal with the final issue, if I may. And you were asked to answer questions about alleged interference by the Guptas and their associates. Now, you mentioned earlier that in 2014, around mid-August 2014, you got the strange call from the City Press journalist. Did the journalist mention anything about the Guptas?
No.
Were you aware? So it was just about 2 months later, after the City Press journalist spoke to you in a strange call, that you participated in a meeting where you joined with your colleagues in signing the recommendation of the motivation to appoint VR Laser for the Hull contract. Is that right?
Correct.
When you were part of that meeting, were you aware that the Guptas or any of their associates, such as Mr. Salim Essa, had any shares or interest in VR Laser?
I did not, but I would imagine even if I did, it would not have mattered.
Right? But you did not at that time. Now, you were asked to comment about your knowledge of the Guptas and their associates' involvement and your contact with them. Did you have any business transactions at all, to your knowledge, at the time that you were still Group Chief Financial Officer, which involved, to your knowledge, the Guptas or their associates?
Not directly. I mean, there could be within the group some business. I wouldn't know.
But were you aware of that or not at the time?
No, I wasn't.
Yes, that's why my question was specific. Were they involved, to your knowledge, at the time? Now, you were asked as to what contact you may have had with the Guptas or their associates, and you've mentioned three things in your affidavit on page 594. The first is a visit to Denell's offices in May-June 2013 by Mr. Hauer, Mr. Williams, and a third individual who came to meet your Group CEO, Mr. Saluji, and your then Business Development Executive, Mr. Nchepe. Do you remember who the third individual was?
I think the first name was Patience. I don't know what the surname.
Patience.
I suspect.
Okay. And were you involved in that meeting? Did you understand why those individuals came to Denell's offices to meet Mr. Saluji and Mr. Nsepe?
Not really. But when the meeting was roughly about 30 minutes. At the end of that meeting, as I was coming out of my office to go for lunch, I was called in, and they introduced to them, and they indicated that they had been to us or to Denell to look for business opportunities. And their understanding was that I'm quite influential, and they would seek to secure a meeting with me in the following week.
Now, your affidavit refers specifically to a subscription for Denell to subscribe to the New Age newspaper and take up advertising space. Was that discussed with you at the time?
So the meeting that was said would be scheduled for the following week. It was scheduled. The same three individuals came to see myself and the communications executive, Bihara Kinga, and they put to us that they were looking for business opportunities, and one key area would be the New Age newspaper that we could subscribe, similar to the SAA and similar to the various government departments, and that's what they put to us. And that meeting wasn't, didn't arrive at anything, because we said to them, we first of all would need to know, do a little bit of homework ourselves, how many business day other newspapers. If we were to subscribe for New Age, it will be within the context of our normal consumption of newspaper. And we ask other questions, typically, what is your circulation? Who is your reader of your paper? And to what extent can that be beneficial to us? For example, if they were to say a lot of youth who are good scientists or engineering students are reading this kind of paper, something that we might have had a look at, because our mandate included ensuring that we do recruit young engineers and nurture those into senior, to become proper and good engineers. So we asked those business principal questions, and the meeting came to an end we said, look, we can't commit to anything. We just do our own homework. If we do meet in future, whatever might happen will be informed by these principles, how they've been adhered or answered.
Arising from those discussions, did you later decide to do any business with the New Age newspaper, either by way of subscription or advertisement?
So what happened in about a week or two after that, I realized that in my diary there was an invitation to Sahara Computers, where for lunch went over. I thought somebody else within the group was possibly coming, because here the guys that I had met only once, a little bit more formal, because we had a 30 minutes or so meeting. I had previously met them for 5 minutes. I thought somebody else was coming. When I got to Sahara Computers, it was two gentlemen, plus patients, plus a fourth person, who I battled to locate who might have been, but a gentleman of the Indian descent.
Sorry, just please speak up a little.
I'm saying a gentleman of Indian descent. We met, we sat around a big table, and he was chairing the meeting, and he did make reference to the fact that they had met with me, and his guys had met with me, and have I reflected on what they are looking for, which I confirmed that I had reflected. I've now had a look at the number of Business Day newspaper that I'm buying, the Star that I'm buying, and any other newspaper that I'm buying. I'm buying no more than 36 copies of all of those newspapers, and the business uses the newspaper in a sharing basis. They put them in a common area. Everyone reads it. So, and then they really were looking for what was the way forward, and I regurgitated the same points that we had made with them, to say, look, to the extent that the newspaper enhances what we are about in terms of our mandate, to the extent that the circulation makes sense, any other services that you're selling should be within the context of our own mandate. We must also further take into account the issues of budget. It must be something that we always wanted, not just because you're selling it. And after this long-winded meeting, because essentially when I'm raising those kind of points, the meeting becomes a little bit long-winded. At the end, I said to them, would it be possible for them to reduce their requests into writing? And I never heard from them since then. But what's relevant also is the fact that when they were explaining the sort of business or the empire they were trying to create in this country, it included setting up ANN 7. At that point, ANN 7 was still being built. The studios were being built, and I was taken around in terms of where the studios would be, what sort of format of television would be used, would be more aligned to some current affairs type program, as apparently there's a channel somewhere in India that that follows that kind of current affairs. So, and I was promised, which happened, I was promised that I would be the first, I'll be among the first people who will be invited to the studios once the studios are up and running to come and talk about Denel. So I never heard from them other than that invite was to come and talk about Denel in ANN 7, which I went there and did, and that was the last time I heard from them.
Thank you, Chair. We have no further further questions of this witness. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mhlongo, for coming to give evidence. We appreciate it very much. If we need you to come back, we will ask you. But for now, you are excused.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, thank you. Our next witness is, I understand, available and ready to start, and that is Mr. Zwelaki Chepe.
Okay, you may call him as soon as Mr. Mhlongo has left the witness chair.
Just leave the files.
Are you going to need me to adjourn, or it will be smooth without adjourning?
I'm sorry, Chair?
Are you going to need me to adjourn before Mr. Njabe, or everything will be smooth, we don't need to adjourn?
I don't think so, although
Okay.
the previous week somebody wanted to sanitize the area. I don't know if that you may want to adjourn while that is done.
Maybe I adjourn for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn.
Thank you very much. Chair, thank you. We're ready for the next witness. It is Mr. Zwelakhe Nchepe.
Yes.
May I just indicate, Chair, that he is legally represented, and my learned friend, Mr. Z. Feni, F-E-N-I, Advocate Feni, instructed by Ali attorneys. I beg your pardon if I've got it wrong. He is
Yes.
present, Mr. Feni is.
Okay. You want to just place yourself on record, Mr. Finn?
May it please you, Chair, I confirm my appearance for Mr. Chapter.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for your guidance. We are dealing now with the affidavits that appear in Denel Bundle 8 under the exhibit number W23. There's a main affidavit and then a supplementary affidavit. And I would ask with your leave to take the witness to that once he's been sworn in. Thank you.
Please administer the oath of affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
My name is Zwelakhe Nchepe.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
I do not.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you swear that the evidence you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
You may be seated, Mr. Chapter.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Kennedy, you may
Thank you,
proceed.
Chair. Mr. Nchepe, thank you for assisting the Commission's legal team earlier in providing two affidavits initially requested by the investigators, and thank you for assisting us as the legal team in a recent consultation. If I can ask you, in the bundle that is in front of you, the file in front of you, do you have it open at page 497, the beginning of your affidavit? And if you look at the top left, printed in black, you will see Denel-08-484 is the title page. And in fact, your affidavit starts, I believe, at 497. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, before your affidavit, what has been included is a series of questions that you were sent by the investigators. And I take you to page 486. That's the beginning of a letter that comes from the Commission sent to your attorneys, clearly attorneys, is that right?
Correct.
And they raised a number of issues, questions under specific topics, in a list of questions from page 488. Is that right?
Correct.
So, for example, the first topic, paragraph 1 on page 488, is Denel Asia.
Correct.
You then responded, as they requested, in the form of an affidavit that starts at page 497, and you then deal with the page 497, paragraph C. You say, I depose to the affidavit in response to the list of questions contained in a letter, and I do so in an affidavit format as a result of a request to respond in such a manner.
Correct.
The list of questions is the one that we have just looked at, is that right?
Correct. Correct.
So when you say, for example, on page 498, paragraph 1, add paragraph 1, it's obviously the lawyer's terminology, add paragraph 1. That is a reference to paragraph 1 of the list of questions that you received from the investigators.
Correct.
Is that correct? And may I ask, is that your signature that appears on page 522? The first signature on page 522.
Correct.
May I ask, have you been through this affidavit?
Yes, I have.
And are you satisfied that its contents are correct, save in one respect, you make a correction of some detail in the second affidavit, which we'll come to?
Correct.
Apart from that particular aspect that you have corrected in your supplementary affidavit, you confirm that the contents of this affidavit are true and correct?
Correct.
Right, thank you. And then before I ask for it to be formally admitted, Chair, may I just complete the process of the second affidavit? Page 523 is another letter from the Commission, the Acting Secretary of the Commission, 523 to 525, and that was a request by the Commission for clarification of some issues that you'd raised in your first affidavit. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you then were requested to provide a supplementary affidavit to deal with that. And may I take you then to page 526? Is that the beginning of your supplementary affidavit?
Correct.
And if I can take you please to page 531, is that your signature above the typed name, ZN Chepe?
Correct.
And again, this was signed in front of Commissioner Rose, like the first affidavit. Is that correct?
Correct.
And have you been through the contents of this supplementary affidavit?
Yes, I have.
Were both of your affidavits done with the assistance of your legal team?
Yes.
Right, thank you. May I ask, you say you've been through this supplementary affidavit. Are you satisfied, and can you assure the Commission's chairperson under oath that the contents are true and correct?
I can confirm to say that they are true and correct.
Right, thank you. Chairperson, we would then formally move for your leave to admit these two affidavits. The one starting at page 497, together with the questions which are followed by the affidavit, as well as the supplementary questions and the supplementary affidavit that starts at page 526. We would ask that the first lot be admitted as Exhibit W23, and the documents that appear from page 523 as Exhibit W23.1.
Okay, I think we'll have to separate the questions from the affidavits. The first affidavit you propose should be admitted as Exhibit W23.
Yes, Chair.
W23.
Yes, Chair.
Okay. I suggest that we do it this way, if it's fine with you, that the letter appearing at page 486, we make it W23.1, and then it's got an annexure, so that will be that letter plus the annexure. And then that's the affidavit which responds to those questions, the Exhibit 23.2. Would that be fine? And then
Yes.
we'll do the same when we go to the other one.
Thank you, Chair.
Is that fine?
Thank you.
Okay. The letter starting at page 486, together with the annexure thereto, is admitted as Exhibit W23.1. And the affidavit of Mr. Zwelakhe Chepe, starting at page 497, is admitted as Exhibit W23.2.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, yeah, 23.2, and then we go to
Page 523, Chair.
next, yeah, that's 523. The letter starting at page 523. Is admitted as Exhibit W23.2. 3.3, and then the affidavit of Mr. Zwelakhe, Hlanganiso Ntsepe, starting at page 526, is admitted as Exhibit W 23.4. Is that fine, Mr. Kennedy?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yes, okay, all right.
All right, thank you, Chair. Mr. Nsepe, you deal first in your main affidavit at page 498 with the issue of Denel Asia. And you refer to the Minister of Public Enterprises giving approval for the Denel Asia joint venture in January 2016. Well, the formation was after the approval in January 2016. And then you refer to the concept and idea being introduced to you by Mr. Riaz Saluji. He was at that stage the group CEO, is that correct?
Correct.
And then we know that Mr. Saluji was suspended from that position, and you then took over as acting group CEO. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. When was that?
That was in September, mid-September 2015.
2015. And before that, you were what? In business development?
Group Executive Business Development, including new business development.
Right. And you then held the acting GCEO position until you were appointed properly as proper GCEO, is that correct?
Correct.
When did that appointment take effect?
That appointment took place end of 2017, I think in December.
Right.
The
So-
position, I'm sorry, the position of Group Executive Business Development that you held before Mr. Saluji was suspended, is that in terms of the structuring of the group one level below that of Group CEO?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Perhaps logically, Chair, I should have taken him first to his background. Perhaps, Mr. Nsepe,
Yeah.
with the Chair's leave, may I take you to your supplementary affidavit? You didn't deal with it in your main affidavit, but the investigators then asked you to deal with it in your supplementary affidavit. If you, Chair, it's Exhibit W23.4, and if I can take you please to page 526. Are you there? Mr. Ntepe, you refer to your professional journey starting in 1982. You worked at Alfa Romeo and then you went to the United States to study, and then you were a night manager at the New York Hilton, and you worked as a stockbroker in the USA. You worked for the Council of Churches in South Africa, and then later you were a senior consultant to Barry Peterson and Associates. Now, it seems that you started at Denel in September 1996. Is that correct?
In fact, I started in November 1996.
Right. So when you say in paragraph 10, it should be November, not September 1996. To November 1997, you were an executive consultant at Denel Personnel Solutions. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. And then it seems you moved up through the ranks. You later became Chief Operations Officer. Would that be of Denel Personnel Solutions?
Yes, correct.
And then later you became a Senior Marketing Manager for Denel SOC Limited. And then you became Director Marketing Asia Pacific until June 2004. And then at that stage you became Group Executive Business Development and Corporate Affairs. That's the top of page 528. And that's when you took up the acting position of Group CEO and later became Group CEO. And then you say you resigned around May 2018.
I resigned May 2018 with a 1 month notice.
Right.
And so my effective resignation was in June, end of June.
All right. thank you. And then in paragraph 13, you set out your duties as when you were still the business development manager. Correct.
Correct.
All right, thanks. That's by way of your background. Now I'd like to go back to your main affidavit, page 498. Paragraph 1, you start dealing with Denel Asia joint venture. And you've referred to your getting to know, I'm in the last 3 lines of 1.1. I got to know about the concept around August 2015. At that time, I was still a group executive business development. Now, if we go to page 507, paragraph 1.11 says a trip was taken early around February 2015 to India and tried to find partners. As stated before, the key ones were already taken, etc. Now, in your supplementary affidavit, you deal with a question that the investigators raised about when, in fact, you first became aware of this concept, which you've now clarified in your supplementary affidavit. Is that correct?
Correct.
If I can take you now, please, to 528, I beg your pardon, Chair. This is what you say at the foot of the page 14, paragraph 3 of the letter addressed to me. Now that's the letter from the investigators, correct? Mr. Nsepe?
Correct.
Raises an issue of an alleged contradiction in paragraph 1.1 of the original affidavit, where it is alleged that I stated that the concept and idea of Denel Asia was first introduced to me by Rio Salugi in September 2015. It is claimed that in the same period, in the same paragraph, I asserted that I got to know about the concept around August 2015. I shudder to think there is any contradiction. At the time of the formation of the Denel Asia, I was Group Executive Business Development. In August 2015, I got to know of the joint venture through the grapevine, and this was ultimately officially introduced to me by Salugi around September 2015. Does that clarify the apparent distinction that the investigators saw between August and September?
In my understanding, yes, it does.
All right, thank you. Now, then you deal with another issue that the investigators raised in relation to travelling to India. And here you seem to accept that there was a mistake, which you say was an honest mistake in your first affidavit, and you clarify that here. Now, in your main affidavit, you indicated that there was a trip to India, and you gave the date of that. And then there were problems with the dates relating to that. Are the correct facts set out in the supplementary affidavit, which say that in fact there were 2 trips, not 1?
Correct.
Okay, and let's just have a look while we're at this. Paragraph 18, the trip we undertook in February 2015 did not include anybody from VR Laser. It's only around March 2016 when we went to an exhibition with VR Laser in Goa. It is in 2016 that the NEL officials used the VR Laser aircraft and not in February 2015. Late September 2015, I became the acting group CEO, and the duties and responsibilities entrusted to Mr. Salugi fell on me. That includes all of the processes, including the incorporation of Denel Asia. So let's go back, if we may. I'm sorry to be jumping around, but I just wanted to clear up those discrepancies first. Let's get back to page 498. Now, you've already mentioned when you dealt with your previous experience that you were involved at a more junior level as far back as about 2004, where you dealt on behalf of Denel with the Asian market as part of your responsibilities.
Correct.
Now, did Denel drop out of the Asian market?
Yes, it did.
And then you refer in your affidavit to the efforts that were made in 2015 there was now the thing that Mr. Saluji indicated to you that Denel was now interested in developing business in Asia. Correct?
Correct.
And in particular, focus on India. Is that right?
Correct.
Now, did you go on your first trip that you mentioned to India to look at that possible business?
Correct. We were three of us, and we in 2015 around February, March, and we went to several companies and be able to work with them, Indian companies.
And so that was three of you from Denel, you and two colleagues.
Correct.
And anybody from VR Laser get involved in that trip?
In 2015, no.
Right. And when did you first become aware of VR Laser's possible interest in Denel's project to look at developing business in Asia?
I became aware officially when it was presented to the board. However, I became aware because I was working very close with the chief executive. We were very close. Denel Asia might be a possibility of a JV that could be formed with VR Laser.
Now, you have indicated in your affidavit that you got to know about the concept of the Denel Asia joint venture when Mr. Saluji raised it officially in August 2015.
Officially, I mean, in the sense that when we were talking, but officially in writing to the board, it was in the September board.
September 2015. Now, who was the person who really initiated the idea of developing this business in Denel? Was it you, or Mr. Saluji, or who?
I cannot confirm who. On my side, I did not develop it because in 2015, we went there to source other Indian companies because in India, there's a requirement that you must buy and make in India. And we were looking at Indian companies. Unfortunately, we found out that we were a bit late. So the concept of going back to India came about because there was the understanding that the banning of Denel in India has been lifted.
When was Denel banned?
I would say banned in the form of blacklisted around 2004.
Was it, and that was about the stage that you left the role, that you were in Denel trying to promote business in Asia. That's right.
Yes, correct.
And so it was blacklisted. Was it blacklisted by whom? By the Indian government, the Indian Defence Force, or who?
There is a thin line of separation between the Indian government and the Indian Defence Force. If the Indian Defence Force does not want to work with you, there's no Indian company that will be able to work with you, especially government companies.
And was that what was the reason for the blacklisting?
There was an alleged accusation that Denel has used agents in India. We were on the brink of securing a huge contract of about 180 vehicles, very powerful vehicles, selling to India, and we were in the process of getting the finalization through their own processes. And then I think the newspaper, the Argus in Cape Town, came out with the story.
So was the blacklisting lifted?
In my understanding, yes, it was lifted because we were allowed to come into India and we were allowed to look at possible partners in India.
When was the blacklisting lifted?
That's in around 2014, 2015.
Okay. So does that explain the first trip that you took? Once the
Yes.
blacklisting was lifted, Indian market was still a possibility, and so you went to investigate. Is that right?
Correct.
And you went with 2 colleagues, and then you came back, and then it seems that you then had the matter escalated to the top executive. It was taken to the board, you say in paragraph 1.1 in September 2015. Was it then approved by the board that you could then proceed to investigate this project further?
Correct.
Okay. Now, there was the second trip that you took to Asia in 2016, you've indicated.
Correct.
Now, before we get to 2016, you've dealt with, in your affidavit, from paragraph, from page 499, with certain steps that took place in paragraph 1.5. There's a step on the 28th of October 2015, a pre-notification to Minister Brown, who was then Minister of Public Enterprises. And then you got approval from the Denel Social and Ethics Committee on 28th of October 2015. And then there was a submission to the then Finance Minister, Minister Nene, on the 29th of October. And then there were meetings and presentations, etc. Now, 157 on page 500 refers to a due diligence report by ENS, that's the attorney's firm ENS, correct?
Correct.
And their forensic unit submitted a due diligence report. What did that relate to?
The due diligence report was related to the circumstances and the ableness of Via Laser to be able to be a partner with Denel.
To be a partner to Denel?
Yes.
In what business? The Asian business that you were aiming to get?
Correct.
Right. Now, at what stage had VR Laser come onto the scene? Why were they looking specifically at VR Laser? Who had identified VR Laser as being somebody worth considering to become your partner in the Denel in the Denel business that you were wanting to expand into Asia?
In my knowledge, Via Laser was identified by the previous CEO in the sense that he did say that we were going to work with Via Laser very closely.
That was Mr. Saluji.
Yes.
Yes. Now, Mr. Saluji has already given evidence about, I think it was 18 months ago before the chair, and he has been asked to testify again later this week to answer specific allegations that have been made by other witnesses such as yourself. And he has told us, and he will tell the chairperson on oath later this week, that he disputes that he was the origin of the idea that VR Laser should be brought in as the partner to Denel for the Denel Asia business. He says, in fact, it was you who came up with the idea, and that you strongly promoted that idea that VR Laser should be the preferred entity to be coming to the joint venture.
I dispute that vehemently.
Yes, carry on.
Mr. Saluji introduced me to Mr. Essa with the understanding that I must work very closely with him. And Mr. Saluji also informed me that Via Laser is prepared to give about 100 million rand into the new venture. So we will need to work to make sure that this new venture will happen. So my duty was to make, as you will notice that my duty was more action oriented in terms of marketing, in terms of new business development. But I had no reason to believe that Via Laser should be our partner, because I did not know Mr. Essa from anywhere.
Were you aware at that stage that Mr. Essa was a business associate of the Gupta brothers?
As time went on, I realized that Mr. Essa has a relationship with the good.
When did you learn of that first? Can you recall, Mr. Nsepe? I know it's a long time ago. If you can't recall, tell us. But can you say roughly?
I will not recall exactly or around what time that happened, because Mr. Saluji did say that I must meet Mr. Essa as often as I can, so that I can be able to get him to be involved in the defense industry.
To get into the
Defense industry.
defense industry?
Yes.
In general, or only in relation to the defense industry supplying to the Asian market?
Well, initially it was in general, and I also think he encouraged Mr. Essa to buy Via Laser, because Via Laser was owned by a different shareholders, and I think, and then later on, he encouraged Via Laser that they would be able to be our partner in to go into the Asian market, and that was in 2016.
Now, you've said two things that you think happened. The one is that you think that Mr. Saluji encouraged Mr. Essa to buy the shares in VR Laser. And the second thing that you think he did was to encourage VR Laser, now under Mr. Essa, to get involved in the Asian market.
Correct.
On what basis do you think that that happened? Do you actually have knowledge yourself of what actually happened?
Mr. Essa, when he bought Via Laser initially, was to help to get into the market, but also because Via Laser had a very good product, was to supply the nail. Secondly, Mr. Essa and Mr. Saluji were able to, in my understanding, were able to know the Guptas, firstly, and secondly, that they made me to believe that we will be able to run smoothly in India, and also to have a buffer between the Denel holdings and the Indian market. So as if there are problems in India, because we did experience problems in India before, then we will be able to have a buffer company, which is a subsidiary of Denel, rather than Denel holdings.
Now, you mentioned the 100 million. That would be an investment by VR Laser once it was acquired by Mr. Essa. Is that right?
No. Mr. Essa had already acquired Via Laser in South Africa. The 100 million would have been a contribution by Via Laser Asia.
So was that also in existence already, VR Laser Asia?
I do not know when it was formed, but in my understanding that there was a concept of a Via Laser Asia, whereby they would have the 100 million contribute to the joint venture.
And what would be contributed, if anything, by Denel, the joint venture?
What would be contributed by Denel, firstly, was we knew the market, and we were out of the market for more than 10 years. And secondly, Denel was able, we had the technical expertise in terms of we knew exactly what India was looking for, especially on the land system side. And Denel would have been a partner in terms of being able to contribute in the manufacturing, but also Via Laser South Africa would also have contributed in the hull manufacturing, because those items that we were looking at in India at that point in time were really were vehicles, in short. But fighting vehicles.
Sorry, would Denel then have contributed its know-how, but it wouldn't have contributed any actual cash to the joint venture, like the 100 million from the VR Laser side?
Denel would have contributed a product, not finished product.
And
The know-how will still be remaining in Denel. Via Laser would have contributed 100 million, and largely what was for the marketing purposes.
Now, your
Well,
affidavit-
maybe, sorry, Mr. Kennedy, before we move too far, I want to take you back a little bit. You said that it was Mr. Saluji who introduced you to Mr. Salim Essa,
Correct.
and that he is the one also that is Mr. Saluji who officially told you about the laser for the first time, is that right? Or did I misunderstand that?
Mr. Saluji is not the first person who told me about the laser.
Officially?
Officially, when we were going to form a joint venture.
Yes.
Yes.
Then it was him.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
From whom did you hear about VR laser for the first time, if you are able to remember?
No, I've been in Denel for more than 20 years. So
By the way, VR laser had been there but owned by other people
Yes.
for quite some time.
Correct.
Okay, all right. But in terms of associating VR laser with Mr. Salim Essa, when did you become aware of that?
I became aware of that when one time he asked me and a colleague who used to be a Denel board member to go and visit via laser. So the three of us
Yes.
went to visit via laser. And it was still owned by other individuals.
Or was he still was he exploring the possibility of acquiring?
I did not know.
You don't know.
The issue was to say, let's go and visit this great company.
Yes. You see, you said that Mr. Saluji introduced you to Mr. Salim Essa.
Correct.
In his affidavit, he also said that.
Correct.
He said he introduced you to, or he introduced Salim Essa to you. But he said that in doing so, one, he was trying to create a distance effectively between himself and Mr. Salim Essa, because Mr. Salim Essa was, I'm putting it in my own words, harassing him or pestering him or trying to put pressure on him, and he decided that he should get him to deal with you. But he says he warned you when he introduced you, Mr. Salim Essa, to you, and said you were going to be the contact person or the person that Mr. Salim Essa would deal with. He says he warned you about his concerns with regard to Mr. Salim Essa and said, be careful. And I think he said, make sure that whatever is done will be done in accordance with the NEL processes. What do you have to say about that?
It is not correct that he introduced me for the reason that he wanted to stay a distance, because I was paid by Denel to do a real job, and I cannot be in man. If he says that, then he was using it inappropriately as an employee of Denel to put a distance between Mr. Essa and himself. In my understanding, and this was in Oakland, he said to Mr. Enda, to Mr. Essa, this is the Zwelake, this is the marketing guy, you can trust him. I will, as you would want to get into the market of defense, we will work together and with him. Yes. But I do not think that he wanted to put the distance between himself and Mr. Essa.
Yes.
Because it would be incorrect. In fact, it's inappropriate for him to say that. Therefore, what's been used.
Yeah, he says after some time, he began to get a feeling that the relationship between yourself and Mr. Essa was becoming too strong. I think that's how I would put it. He was getting concerned. I can't remember whether he says he spoke to you about that at that stage or not.
Chair, I saw his affidavit where he mentioned all these things about me. My job as business development is to have strong relations in the defense environment. Trust is very important globally. As I said, I've worked for a very long time in marketing, and I have created and been able to develop trust in the markets we operate, especially in the Middle East and in South Africa in particular. the Defence Force. I would therefore not think that I would be involved in a situation whereby I will be doing things with Mr. Essa because I have come close to him, which he would not know. Because I used to report to him because he wanted to know what is happening every week. If he wanted a distance, why would he want to know every week?
Okay, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair. On page 499, paragraph 1.3, you say you were appointed by the board of Denel to be the chairperson of VR Laser Asia. Is that correct?
Correct.
We're not talking here about Denel Asia. It's VR Laser Asia. It was an already existing company. Yes, correct. Is that correct?
It was existing in terms of preparations, but what was existing then was the company that was, I think, via Laser Asia. Yeah, but not owned by via Laser South Africa.
So who was it owned by? Was it not also owned by Mr. Salim Essa?
Salim Essa owns via Laser, in my understanding, via Laser South Africa.
So who owned VR Laser Asia?
I would believe he did.
I'm sorry, who?
I would believe he did.
He did, Mr. Essa?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what? Were you not aware when you were appointed as chairperson of this company who actually owned it?
I was aware that the mere fact that the names are similar, there is a relationship. Number one. And number two, the mere fact that I was asked to work very closely with Mr. Essa, I would not be able to start another via Laser Asia, which has the name via Laser Asia without me being Mr. Essa being the owner of the company.
But Denel didn't own VR Laser Asia, correct?
No, they didn't.
It was owned, as you understand it, by Mr. Salim Essa.
Yes.
Now, what I'm interested in is why would you have been appointed then to chair a company in which Denel didn't own the shares? You
And
said
who
Mr.
appointed you?
Your affidavit, in fact, says you were appointed by the board of Denel SABC Limited to serve as chairperson of VR Laser Asia.
Correction here. The correction is that it should have been Denel Asia.
Denel Asia?
Yes.
So this is another error in your affidavit.
Yes.
So you say in paragraph 1.3, where it says you are appointed by the board of Denel to be the chairperson of VR Laser Asia, you say
It's Denel Asia.
Denel Asia.
Yes, because via Laser Asia was owned by Salim Essa.
Okay, there'll have to be a supplementary affidavit.
Yes. Okay. If you can assist the Commission further in that regard, with the help of your attorneys, acting in liaison with the legal team that has already been working with your legal team, your own legal team. Now, I'd like to go back to page 500.
And maybe, Mr. Kennedy, when was it when this happened, when you were appointed as chairperson of Denel Asia?
I think it was in 2017, early 2017, February, March, around it. I cannot specifically say. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I take you back to page 500, paragraph 157? It's the ENS Forensic Unit due diligence report that you mentioned looked at the ability of VR Laser to work as a joint venture partner with Denel in its Asian operations. Correct. Now, is it correct that the ENS due diligence report in fact raised some concerns?
Correct.
And what were those concerns?
In my memory, one of them was that the people who we want to form a joint venture with are PEPs, meaning that they are publicly exposed persons Yes.
Publicly or politically?
Or politically, yeah, politically exposed persons.
And who were they referring to?
In my belief, because the owner of Via Laser was Mr. Essa. So in
Salim
my
Essa.
view, that was.
And did you understand their concern to be that Mr. Salim Essa was already in the public domain, the public knowledge and media and so forth, already a controversial figure?
Yes, I was aware.
And
But for me, the business was separate from the individuals. How the public views the individual. Many companies have done joint ventures with individuals that were perceived to be controversial.
So, are you saying that, to your knowledge, at that time, Mr. Salim Essa would have fallen within the category of politically exposed persons within that group of people?
As per the definition of ENS.
Yes.
Yes.
And that definition necessarily, does that definition, as you understand it, necessarily have some negative connotation to it or not? Or it depends on each individual?
I think largely it has a negative connotation.
It has a negative connotation. And you understood him to, at that time, to fall within that category.
I understood him that he's been exposed to the politics of the country. Yes.
Okay, all right, Mr. Kennedy.
thank you, Chair. But you, as far as you were concerned, this should not disqualify them, it should not be a problem. The mere fact that they were politically exposed or controversial didn't take away from the fact that they were suitable business partners. Is that right?
In fact, ENS said we can still go ahead. There is a way how we can be able to do that.
Please just repeat that, Mr. Nsebe.
ENS said you at the Via Laser they are PEPs. However, it is possible to form a joint venture with the Via Laser.
Yes. Their due diligence, what it did reveal about VR Laser, in terms of negative things for Mr. Salim Essa, that Denel may have needed to be careful about or concerned about, if you are able to remember.
Yes, I remember one was the issue of a close relationship with the Gupta.
Yes, yes.
And in my understanding, the previous GCEO, he knew that. It was not...
Tesaluji.
Yes, it was not news to him. He knew it.
Yes.
Yes. And however, he encouraged me to work with him.
Yes.
And that is, to me, that was a major thing which I thought was...
Obviously, this being 2015, it was paragraph 1.5.7 of the affidavit says, on 2 December 2015, ENS provided a due diligence report. Obviously, this was quite some time after the waterproof plane landing incident that had happened in 2013.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, all right, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you. And then the previous paragraph 156 refers to the Minister of DPE granting Denel approval in principle to continue discussions with VR Laser. Was that Minister Brown at that stage?
Correct.
Right, thank you. And then you get in 158 approval from the board of Denel. That's final approval of VR Laser as equity partner. That's the 7th of December 2015. Is that correct?
Correct.
By that stage, you were already acting as GCEO. You were no longer just the Executive for Business Development. You were now acting GCEO. Is that right?
Correct.
Right. Now, had any consideration or effort been given up to this point to whether you should be looking at any other person other than VR Laser? Or was it simply VR Laser and nobody else?
In 2015, as I said, early 2015, Chair, we went to India, in particular to do the exercise to see who can we partner with in India in order to fulfill the requirement of buy and make India. We visited defense companies and we found out, because we've been out of the market, that they have already associated themselves or formed JVs with other international companies. And we were going to tender for the same product. And therefore they told us, except for one company, that was, if I still remember, BAML. BAML was a state-owned company. It was prepared to work with us, but at the subcontractor level, because even the product that they were going to work with Denel was not their product. It was, if I'm not mistaken, a Czech product, a truck called Tata.
Why was it necessary to have a partner at all? Why could Denel not simply do the work itself?
As I said,
Produce the vehicles, for example, through one of its divisions, such as, for example, LMT.
the vehicle is a specialized vehicle. It's an 8x8. And there is a huge vehicle that can take the big, massive cannons. And Denel does not have that capability to do that. We have never produced a truck. Even the summer trucks that you see on the road were never produced by Denel. So we have never produced a truck. So Denel in certain areas buys subsystems already existing in the market, or subsystems that the client is saying that this is what we would like, whoever is going to bid for this contract, this is the subsystem we would like to see. And Tatra is a good vehicle. It's used globally. And in fact, there was another time when the Tata, TATA, also has a truck in India. But and they once used the Denel Canon to do a demo in India. And however, there were problems, and which in the end, I think there was no compatibility. But the truck from BAML, and BAML got the truck from Czech Republic, was the truck that we believed that will be able to carry the big cannon, which was the 155 millimeter, which weighs more than say 15 tons.
Now you mentioned that you needed a partner for the reasons that you've indicated, and that when you went on your trips, the 2 trips in 2015 and early 2016, it became apparent that this was now pretty late. You couldn't find an overseas partner that would work for you. Is that right?
In 2015.
2015.
Yes.
Because of course, when you went in March 2016 with VR Laser's people on their company aircraft, you had already formed Denel Asia and entered into an arrangement with VR Laser.
Correct.
Right. Now, you deal in some detail with the process that was followed, how the board gave approval, and how there was a shareholders agreement, 1.5.10. There was a shareholders agreement concluded on 10th of December 2015 between Denel and VR Laser with some suspensive conditions. And these suspensive conditions included approval under sections 51 and 54 of the PFMA.
Correct.
And that process was then followed when you submitted the next paragraph. On the 11th of December, Denel submitted a formal PFMA application to Minister Brown at the DPE and Mr. Van Rooyen. He was by then the short-term Minister of Finance. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, that required a 30-day period to run, and in terms of the relevant sections, if there was no response by the end of the 30-day period from the ministers concerned, that would be deemed to be approval. Is that right?
That was my understanding.
And then that expired on the 10th of January, and then you get on the 13th of January, in 1513, a letter from the chairperson of the board instructing you to proceed to incorporate Denel Asia. Was the chairperson at that stage Mr. Mancha?
Correct.
Right. Why was he giving you the instruction? Was that not simply an operational matter that you as acting GCEO would know to do yourself? Why did it come from the chairman?
The motivation to form the joint venture went to the board and it was approved by the board. Secondly, the issue of correspondence with the minister at ministerial level is, in terms of protocol, is with the chairperson of the board, not with me. I correspond directly with the DG. And Mr. Mancha was able and was available all the time, and he knew about what was happening in terms of forming this joint venture. And in January, he asked me, in fact, in writing, to say that the 30 days have passed, because Denel, in truth, Denel had never had money.
Never had money
Yes.
for this project or
No, Denel had never, was never a sustainable, profitable company. As long as I remember. And I don't know why they are not saying that.
well,
You can go.
the CFO who was here told us something different.
Yes, and because it was short after I had as group director marketing or group executive got orders. Because initially they were only concentrating in South Africa. Then after the independence or after the settlement in South Africa, then they had a problem because South Africa had stocks and they could not sell.
Well, I asked him the question with reference to September 2015 when he and the other executives were suspended. I asked him what the financial position of Denel was at that time. And then he told me about 1992 and the years after that. But then when it came to 2015 and the years that came, the following years, up to I think 2018, that the financial situation of Denel was good. But then in 2018 or 2019, it went down.
Correct.
So
correct.
you don't dispute that part?
No, I don't dispute.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure.
No, I don't
Yeah,
dispute.
okay. No, that's all right.
Okay, then just to follow the sequence, you then, so you get that instruction on the 13th of January 2016 from Chairperson Mansa, and then on the 29th of January 2016, Denel Asia was formed and incorporated in Hong Kong. Now, some people have suggested that this was all a very rushed process, which you have denied in your affidavit. What is significant, it seems to me, Mr. Ntsepe, that if you look back at the timetable from 1.5.1, where you submit a pre-notification about the formation of Denel Asia to Minister Brown, and then you follow the various other processes, it seems to have been remarkably quick, particularly for government, that is not always well known for being very quick in some of these procedures, that it really took just a few months from beginning to end. And already by the 29th of January 2016, you'd actually formed the company in Hong Kong.
Correct.
Is it not unusually quick?
No, I don't think it's quick because other companies form joint ventures within a month, private companies. This took 3 months. And I have to say, our chairperson at the point in time because he wanted to move Denel forward, and he believed in this JV, and he said you have to work. We used to have many board meetings there. That's why you see so many dates, because I would not be able to move to the other activity without getting a board approval. And the 3 months for me, and internationally, I think, in fact, internationally, it could be long. You know, it's not necessarily that it's a quick. And another thing is that Denel, because it's a government company, then it must be slow. I think that should not be the standard that we measure ourselves.
Yes. Unfortunately, when it came to the actual business that was already being undertaken, the Hoofhuister project, we know that it was delayed by year after year after year, if not more than a decade. Unfortunately, the speed with which the Denel Asia project was undertaken wasn't always applied in practice for some of the other initiatives or undertakings.
Chair, if I can explain on that issue. The Hoofhuister project was approved in 2008 that Denel will do it. And Denel was going to partner with Patria. And Patria was going to transfer its IP to Denel in South Africa. However, we had two problems. First problem is that you needed a system, a gun. A gun by itself. I'm sorry, because this is a military business, I have to talk. Yeah, was an American gun, and our defense force was not very comfortable with it. That you must make, you Denel must manufacture and make your own gun, and to the accolade of our engineers, they were able to do that. Number one, and number two, what you call the baseline, product baseline before it's accepted. There was a bit of development that still had to be done, including the gun, which took time, and the clock was moving. And mind you, these are technical issues; these are not marketing issues, and they take time to mature and be able to say that you can bring the client to come and test it. So they took time. I'm not justifying the long period that they have, but I'm just explaining how the industry works. It will take time, but of course, 11 years is a long time. It's
Very long time.
It's a very long time.
Yeah.
And it had massive financial implications also.
Correct.
Sorry?
Chair, may I ask you indulgence?
Yes. Sorry?
Short adjournment.
Oh. Comfort break. Well, we are at 4:10. Maybe we should take it, but we are going to have to stop at 5:45 or thereabouts.
5:45.
Yeah.
Thank you. That would be
Yeah.
thank you.
So let's take just 10 minutes, and then we will resume. We adjourn.